analogy, I can see that there is going to be a correlation between somebody else's bodily states which I observe and their mental states which I don't observe. So it's an argument by analogy. You see, I have bodily sensations of my own. But my bodily sensations are in some cases caused by other bodies, the behavioral manifestations of which are analogous to my own. So where I know the kinds of mental states that correspond to my bodily states, I can then infer the kind of mental states which would correspond to other people's bodily states. So that if I stub my toe and it hurts, then I can anticipate that if I see somebody else stubbing their toe and yelping the way I yelped, that it hurts, and I'm having some knowledge of other people's mental states. So you get then his proposal for an analogical inference, an argument by analogy, to the existence of other minds. And incidentally, what Descartes started there was followed throughout the 18th century and into the 20th century, throughout the English and continental traditions. This was, until the 19th century, the standard way of arguing for the existence of other minds. And it's not until late 19th, early 20th century that you get some notion developing of some more direct awareness of other people's consciousness. So the language of people like Martin Buber about an I-thou relationship, you see, is an attempt to say, no, it's not just an analogical inference through this sort of Cartesian process, but something much more intimate by virtue of such emotional states as empathy or sympathy. Okay? Which is literally feeling with, you see, a shared consciousness. Or empathy, yes, feeling in somebody else's moccasins, a shared feeling, some sense of that. Okay, so this is the route he goes. Three other things arising from this that he takes up. One is the problem of error. After all, he has talked of sensations that can be taken as veridical, but aren't there also sensory illusions? Aren't there also physiologically called hallucinations, and so forth? How are we going to account for that? And if God is perfect, such that our sensing capacities that he has given us do not deceive, how come we are deceived? You see, it's back to that old question from Meditation 4, but now addressed to sense perception, rather than to abstract thought that was the way it was back then. Well, a couple of factors that he throws in that you could almost predict. One is that our bodies are made up of many different parts, such that some malfunctioning due to illness or whatever of one part may cause sensations which are not telling us directly the truth. And he would account for hallucinations in that sort of way. The other thing that he throws in is that the will and the intellect are both involved. There is nothing deceptive about having a whole string of sensations. Sensations 1, 2, 3, 4, of which, say, sensation 4 may prove to be untrustworthy. Now, the error only consists in our making a judgment that involves the reliability of sensation 4. So the act of judgment involves intellect in taking stock of the sensations and will in affirming the judgment. And we err, and then you know the story, when we allow the will to make judgments beyond the extent to which the intellect is satisfied about the sensations. They must be clear and distinct. So it's basically the same kind of argument as you had in meditation 4. All right, error. The second residual question is the big one about the mind-body relationship. About the mind-body relationship. Because what Descartes has given to us so far is the existence of a body which is a spatially extended thing, and the existence of a mind or soul which is a thinking thing. That is to say, they are two essentially different things. By essentially, we mean they have different essences. They have no essential properties in common. They're essentially different things. Somehow or other conjoined. How does that work? Let's see. Now, I think it's fair to say that Descartes intended it this way. Because you remember in the preface he says he's setting out to prove the existence of the soul. If you like, he's trying to prove the existence of the kind of soul that is a substantive thing of an immaterial sort and therefore can survive death. It's capable of independent existence. And so he wants the soul to be a functionally separate thing, an essentially different thing, and a functionally separate thing. And he's got what he wanted. But the problem that engenders, obviously, is how are these two related? And Descartes' view is that both mind and body function as causes producing effects on the other. So certain mental acts can cause bodily changes, such as they did just now when you started scribbling that down. And by the same token, certain bodily changes can produce mental states, sensations. So there is a causal interaction. Causal interaction. Well, that sounds nice. And certainly there seems to be evidence that what's going on in the mind influences what the body does and vice versa. Yeah, but how does it happen? If these are two essentially different and substantively independent entities, how can they causally interact? And what Descartes comes up with in his work on the passions and then develops in correspondence with people is that the interaction takes place in the pineal gland, which is apparently back there somewhere. And in that day of dissections trying to explore the body and its mechanisms, they couldn't see whatever function it had. And in addition, while there seem to be two of other kinds of glands, there's only one of these, which seems to indicate that it's intended to unify something. And so they lit on this. Descartes did, at least. How does it function, though? Because a gland is part of a body. And so it still hasn't told us anything. You see? Well, what he does is to picture the human body as containing certain canals through which the animal spirits, as they call it, go on their way. Now, this is obviously the physiology of the 16th and 17th century, these animal spirits. Remember, the circulation of the blood was not discovered until the 17th century. Harvey, incidentally, he was a neighbour of mine. I grew up in the town of Dover in southeast England. His home was in Folkestone, 7 miles away. A statue to him on the seafront in Folkestone. And the high school in Folkestone, which was our constant competitor athletically, was the Harvey School, named after him. Harvey Grammar School. Grammar school in England is a secondary school. Presumably they don't teach grammar anywhere else, but Harvey Grammar School. 17th century, you see. And in Descartes' day, they were thinking not in terms of circulation of the blood, but of the circulation of animal spirits, you see, which go their way through the glands. And he thought of the gland as sort of suspended into this channel through which the animal spirits go, so that the animal spirits, that is to say bodily processes, influence the gland, which somehow or other, being connected to the brain, produces brain changes and consciousness changes. And that was the best he could do. So you get that mind-body interaction. Well, the story of Descartes' pineal gland is usually treated as one of those classic goofs, because it doesn't explain it at all, you see. And it's that which is really the major problem with this. That added to the obvious fact that while there is causal interaction between what goes on in the mind and what goes on in the body, somehow or other we are a functional unity. This mind-body causal interaction approach does not seem to explain the essential unity of the self. You see, it doesn't seem right to say, I'm a mind that has a body. You see, I'm more of a psychosomatic unity. And it's that unity that is missing in Descartes. And consequently, Descartes' successors are constantly worried about this mind-body problem. What are we going to do about it? What alternatives are there, you see? Well, there was one alternative that developed largely as a result of certain Calvinists, a man by the name of Geulincx, Geulincx, developed a theory known as occasionalism,